President Trump had never shut down an airport before, but what happened in the Alaska skies that morning changed everything. The quiet routine of air travel was about to be shattered in a way that would ripple far beyond the frozen tarmac. At Anchorage International Airport, passengers moved through the terminals unaware of the looming crisis. They were just beginning their day, checking in their luggage, grabbing a quick coffee, scrolling through their phones, or making small talk with fellow travelers. The airport buzzed with the familiar rhythm of early departures, but none of the passengers or staff knew that a chain of events was already in motion, one that would end with an emergency broadcast to the highest levels of government and would be remembered as a defining moment in aviation safety. Deep in Alaska's snow-covered wilderness, a single flight was preparing for takeoff, unknowingly positioned at the center of a life-or-death scenario. That morning, Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport sat under a pristine winter sky. It was the kind of day pilots dream of: cold air for better engine performance, light wind, and near-perfect visibility. The sunlight reflected off icy surfaces, casting long, clear shadows across the runways. Passengers scurried to the gates bundled in coats and hats, their breath visible in the frigid air as they cradled hot coffee like a survival tool against the biting cold. At Gate 37, a Boeing 737 sat idle, appearing like any other aircraft ready for its next journey. The aircraft looked nearly brand new, its polished exterior gleaming in the crisp morning light. Despite clocking more than 25,000 hours of flight time, its appearance betrayed no hint of wear. The ground crew, seasoned and synchronized, moved around the plane with practiced ease. Like dancers in a choreographed performance, they worked through their checklist, inspecting systems, loading baggage, and refueling, all without a hitch. Everything about the scene spoke of routine. And yet, within the silent framework of the aircraft's engines and inner mechanisms, something hidden, something dangerous, was quietly ticking toward disaster. Beneath the metal skin of the aircraft, beyond the view of engineers or pilots, a flaw remained undetected. This was not a failure of negligence, but a chilling reminder that no system, no matter how advanced, is immune to the unpredictable. What made this flight different wasn't visible to the naked eye. It wasn't something the captain or crew could have sensed before departure. It was tucked away, deep within the machinery, poised to turn a routine cross-country flight into a defining case study of risk, decision-making, and survival. The skies above were flawless, stretching endlessly in a canvas of blues and whites. A few wispy clouds drifted lazily across the horizon, giving no indication of the turbulence to come. The forecast had been clear: no storms, no jet stream complications, no threats. From every standpoint, it was an ideal day to fly. Pilots live for these kinds of conditions, where nature itself offers a green light. But perfection, especially in aviation, can be deceptive. Sometimes, it masks the brewing of the most unforeseen dangers. As passengers boarded the aircraft, there was nothing remarkable about the process. The familiar mix of seasoned travelers, families on vacation, and professionals headed to business meetings filled the cabin. Some wore headphones, others pecked away at laptops or flipped through magazines. There were smiles, yawns, idle chatter. Everyone had their own story, their own destination, their own assumptions about the hours ahead. But what none of them knew was that they were boarding a flight destined to make history, not for where it would land, but for what it would survive. In the cockpit, the crew ran through their routine checks with methodical discipline. The captain, a man with more than 15,000 hours in the air, and his first officer, equally experienced, had worked together many times. Their dynamic was smooth, professional, and calm. They verified weather updates, ran diagnostics, and reviewed systems with precision of a military team. The aircraft's maintenance logs showed no anomalies. All signs pointed to another successful flight, bound from Alaska to New York. Yet, even the most stringent inspection protocols can miss a critical minute fault, a misaligned panel, a stress crack, a slowly loosening bolt. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Engines roared to life as the aircraft began pushback. The jet's familiar whine echoed across the icy tarmac, signaling readiness. To the crew and passengers alike, there was no indication that this takeoff would be anything other than standard. As the aircraft taxied to the runway, its shadow stretched across the white-patched ground. From the control tower, the traffic controllers moved planes like chess pieces, maintaining the complex choreography of departures and arrivals. The 737 reached its mark. Final checks were complete. Clearance came through. You're good for takeoff. The plane accelerated down runway 4 left, gaining speed steadily. The engines responded with a smooth surge of power. Moments later, the aircraft lifted off, banking gently over the Alaskan landscape. Everything proceeded as expected. Within minutes, the flight climbed through 3,000, then 5,000, then 10,000 feet. The climb was steady, uneventful. The crew eased into cruise procedures. But at altitude, something began to shift, something small at first, so subtle it went unnoticed by most. A faint vibration, a slight hum out of rhythm with the aircraft's normal song, began to ripple from the starboard side. It started as something easily dismissed. After all, planes vibrate all the time. Turbulence, engine harmonics, airflow, they all play their parts. Most passengers didn't notice. Those who did chalked it up to normal flight quirks. But in aviation, small changes can snowball into major crises. In the cockpit, instruments began to display minor inconsistencies in the right engine's performance. Temperatures rose slightly, too slight for alarms, but enough for seasoned pilots to raise an eyebrow. Flight data would later confirm that the right engine's internal temperature was increasing at 2 degrees per minute. Not a spike, not enough to flash red, but enough for the crew to notice a pattern forming. Engine pressure ratios fluctuated ever so slightly. Power output readings dipped and rebounded. The vibration transformed from a whisper to a murmur. Meanwhile, in the cabin, ripples began to appear in passengers' drinks. Window shades vibrated just enough to make their presence known. The flight attendants exchanged subtle glances. Silent communication only years of experience could convey. Despite the growing concern, the aircraft's advanced warning systems remained silent. No lights, no buzzers, no recorded alerts. It was a flaw in the very systems designed to prevent disaster, a situation serious enough to be felt, but not yet measurable by onboard diagnostics. And so, the human factor became critical. The pilot's instinct sharpened. The attendant's intuition flared. Something was wrong, something the aircraft couldn't yet say aloud. Back in the cabin, the soundscape changed. A discordant hum emerged beneath the familiar thrum of engines. Experienced flyers might not be able to explain it, but they could feel it. It was no longer turbulence. It was mechanical, a pulse, a rhythm that didn't belong. Flight attendants noted passenger unease. They moved calmly but swiftly, reassuring, checking seatbelts, pausing for longer looks out the windows on the right side. Out there, something was starting to become visible. The right engine's protective cowling, the curved metal cover that shields internal components, had begun to peel away mid-flight. At 36,000 feet, this was a catastrophic mechanical development. The failure exposed the engine's internal systems to brutal high-altitude conditions. Vibration levels surged. Aerodynamics were thrown off. The plane's stability began to waver, and a new urgency gripped the cockpit. Standard procedures dictated a controlled descent, but the mountainous terrain below made that dangerous. Every decision now carried immense risk. Passengers seated on the right side stared in disbelief. Some pointed. Others gasped. The exposed engine vibrated violently, sending shudders through the fuselage. Inside the cockpit, the pilots now faced fluctuating thrust levels, erratic readouts, and machine that was becoming harder to fly by the second. The aircraft's automation system struggled to compensate. Manual control was required. The crew worked fast, communicating, recalculating, adjusting. The pressure mounted with every passing moment. As the situation worsened, the crew had to make a choice. Where could they land? The terrain below limited their options. Fuel consumption was rising due to erratic engine performance. Time was against them. After intense calculation and coordination with air traffic control, they identified Anchorage International Airport as their best shot. It was close, familiar, and equipped for emergencies. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The descent was brutal. As the aircraft dropped altitude, the changing air density intensified the engine's instability. Vibrations grew chaotic. The crew fought for balance and speed. Weather around Anchorage had shifted. Winds were strong, and visibility was worsening. Despite this, emergency teams were activated. Runways were cleared, and hospitals were placed on alert. On final approach, the plane rocked violently. The right engine groaned, but the pilots, calm, focused, and resolute, held their course. At last, the runway appeared ahead, with nerves of steel and hands steady on the controls. The crew brought the wounded aircraft down. Tires screeched against wet asphalt. Emergency vehicles chased them down the runway. But they made it. Against all odds, they made it. The passengers, shaken but alive, erupted in applause and tears. The crew had pulled off a feat of aviation skill under unimaginable pressure. The emergency landing, far from their intended destination, became the only choice for survival. In the aftermath, investigators would dissect every detail. The story would be told in aviation schools and cockpit briefings. This flight would go down not just as a mechanical failure, but as a testament to human decision-making, teamwork, and the enduring value of experience. It would reshape aviation protocols forever.